All right, here we go. So, if you would pay attention here, please. All right, so here we go. All right, for this project, what you're doing, like I said, is you are going to be working with font. We're going to be drawing these fonts in 4 different quadrants on your page, and I'm going to explain the actual project to you in a little bit here. But to give you a quick overview of how to actually do, how to draw fonts. Sometimes they can be really complicated, sometimes they can be very easy. You can see here on this Bad Movie Night poster that I have, they're pretty basic. I mean, these are very generic looking forms. Looks like maybe a Helvetica, maybe a slight italicized or something to it, but pretty basic block letters. So that's what I want to start with. Again, just like whenever you're doing blocking in with a still life object, no matter how complicated or how easy it is, always start with the bare bones basics, give it kind of a skeleton, and then you can make it flourished and fancy from there, okay? So for example, if I'm going to do maybe like, let's see, I'm going to do this A. That seems kind of complicated, a little bit more complicated at least. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to do this A. Now notice that it is still pretty much just a blocked in letter A, but there's some curves and things to it. It can be a little complicated. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to imagine myself here kind of like with a square. Oh, I got like a little kung fu guy in the background. Imagine, and you don't have to actually draw this out. I'm just kind of showing you. What you want to think about in your letter form is if you recall back whenever you were in like elementary school, right? They all had that paper with all those like lines across it. There was a line across the middle, like a strike through and all that. And what it helped you when you were a little kid learning to draw, you know, you kind of doing one of these things and you can't quite hold the pencil in that. And you're like, okay, well, your teacher says draw that letter. So you go, okay, well, there it's above the line halfway. So there's a little curve here. And it kind of comes down, and there's like a loop-de-loo, something like that, right? And that's how you would do it when you were in elementary school. That's how we learn to write, the bare bones basics of everything, right? What we're going to do is we're going to mimic that elementary school style to get that kind of blocking in going on, okay? So for example, if I'm doing this letter A, same exact thing. I'm going to think about where the middle is of this letter, and it looks to me like, you know what, that little circle, that little Humpty Hump on that A is maybe below halfway. So whereas I have it up on top here, I want to make sure that that's below, okay? It also, if you see it, kind of has a little bit of a swirl to it, maybe like a teardrop shape, so it kind of comes up and in, something like that, right? So I'm thinking about the positive and I'm thinking about the negative space. I'm kind of slowly blocking this stuff in and taking care of it from there. Yes, sir?
Hey, do you have any like spray snow, like spray paint, but it looks like snow? Because we need it for our markless class.
Nope.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep, all the best. So I'm going through, and now I'm going to kind of block it in again, thicken it up a little bit. And again, by no means do you have to start with that little loop-de-loo here. It's just where I'm choosing to start. I know there's kind of this squared off form, so I'm just going to put in a nice square. But if you notice, again, it's got a little bit of a curvature to it. So I'm going to swoop it in a little bit, cut it off. And then as it comes up top here, again, give it a nice little, maybe like a half circle kind of idea. So again, I'm thinking about blocking in. Just like before, I'm using squares, circles, and triangles to block this letter form in. And then it'll kind of smooth together, just like so. Now obviously you still have to play with it. This is by no means perfect, right? But it gives you kind of that foundation to build off of. So again, let's try something else. Let's see, let's do the G in guy, okay? So again, this time I'm going to go without that little box, that little container box, because to be fair, you don't really need it. I am going to think about the middle of my page here, so I'm going to say that that's about the middle. And I can even divide it up this way too. If you guys remember whenever you did your enlargement or using that grid style, right? We gridded everything off, we made it smaller pieces, and that made it easier for us to draw. In essence, I'm doing the same thing here. I'm gridding things off to make them a little bit smaller. Now, for this G, we know that the G is kind of built out of the letter C. And of course, I know what the letter C looks like. That's not rocket science. So I'm going to start with kind of the basics here. There's my letter C. Obviously, I've got this line right here that kind of comes up and back down. That's kind of my blocked in letter G. This is just lines right now. I'm going to go through and literally block it in again using circles and squares. Make it very stiff looking. Right? Thicken it up a little bit. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. If you notice, I'm trying to mimic this G as best that I can. If you notice, this G here is slightly, just ever so slightly italicized. It's kind of leaning just a little bit, right? Not a whole lot. The G that I have is obviously perfectly straight up and down, so I don't want that. So I've sketched it on. I'm now going to go through, let's see if I can switch out my colors. Grab a pen for you. So now I want to start thinking about leaning it just slightly that direction, right? So I'm going to go through, take the same shape that I have, only I'm going to lean it. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it here. There are plenty of people who say go grab a ruler and actually make this happen. And you are welcome to do that if you're so inclined. I'm more of an eyeballing kind of guy. So there's a slight lean to it now, right? I've got this G. I know that the top of the G lines up directly with that little crisscross bar there. So here's my new crossbar. I've moved it. So I know that the top of the G has to come to there. Makes sense? Then I'm going to start to do that same curve, but this time it's going to come up a little bit more because it is leaning just so slightly. And back down again. I'm looking at where that G comes from, right in that corner, right here. Same thing, up. Keep those lines nice and smooth. Up. And around. Darken it in so you guys can see. Right? So that is a slight italicized to it. Right? And that's basically my letter G right there. Just like how it looks on the page, I've drawn it much, much larger. Okay? Again, anytime you're enlarging something, if you want to use this grid style method to kind of do your blocking in, it's going to be the best case scenario because it's going to make things a little bit more simplistic for you. Now, I'm going to flash this real quick. Again, come to bad movie night. Da, 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 da. Okay, all right. Anyway, that was my self-promotion, sorry. All right, so I've got these letter forms. And again, let's be fair, these are a little bit complicated, right? Italicized, gridding it off here, thinking about the halfway point in that. But let's be perfectly honest, this is basically just a gridded off, blocked in letter. There's nothing super complicated about it. So I'm going to ask you guys who have your stuff printed out, does anyone have one that's like uber complicated? Like crazy, liquidate your brain complicated? All right, what do you got for me there? Oh my, all right, yeah, that is complicated. All right, so here's one here. One of our studentos has given to me. She's doing the word rude, which is kind of rude, just saying. And she wants to talk about this style here. So this is kind of an old English style, right? It looks like something like scripting or something you'd find back in those illuminated texts that we talked about, right? So how the heck do you draw something like that? That's a lot of little extra pieces. All right, let's figure it out. So first things first, again, I'm going to think about that halfway point, right? That's going to be kind of my basis for everything. Again, especially if you're doing, again, think about like elementary school. If you're doing like a lowercase p or a q, something with a little tail on the end of it, you really want to think about where that is, because that's going to help you line things up with each other, okay? So I'm going to go over here. Oops, I'm pretty zoomed in there. I apologize. All right. So first things first, let's say I'm going to draw it about yay-ish big. And again, you don't have to do the block ahead of time. I'm just kind of mimicking what your project's going to look like. And I'm thinking about where the halfway point is for that. So that's, again, giving me, in essence, my kind of grid idea. If you want to do a vertical line, you're more than welcome to. So I'm going to start off with a basic, solid, blocked-in letter form, just like our letter A or our letter G, very basic looking. So it won't really look like this at all, and that's okay. But I want to make sure things are in the right place. So I've got this kind of tall bar right here. I'm going to make sure that that's somewhere in here-ish. Looks like it's almost about there, give or take. Then we've got kind of the loop of the R, and it's going to go on kind of, again, here-ish. Notice that there's kind of a point to it up here, so I can kind of mimic that a little bit. Something like that. Then I've got this tail, or little foot that comes down here. So again, kind of eyeballing it. Look how it comes out right there. Okay, so I want to make sure that it comes out just the same distance. And this is where kind of that mathematics side of things comes into play. Thinking about where everything kind of lines up, just like whenever we did the human face, how there are certain parts of your face that kind of line up to each other. It's the same thing. You've got the actual letter form right here, so don't be afraid to draw as many lines across here as you need to ensure that things are in the right place. Don't just eyeball it. Don't just say, well, it kind of goes there-ish, right? Actually look on it, right? Things are going to line up to each other all the time. So I've got my kind of blocked-in basic letter R here, but I want to make sure that it looks much more like this. So start thinking about the thin and thick here. If it's a brush script, you're going to see that it goes kind of thin to thick to thin again. So I'm going to think about that. Let's see. It comes in a little bit. Comes up like so. Kind of comes almost like a little bit of an L shape here. I have it a little more curved to make it a little more blocky. Don't be afraid to erase. You're going to have lots of little pencil lines. Draw lightly. Draw concisely. Looks like there's kind of a scoop right in here. Again, if it helps, sound effects do tend to help. A little bit of a curve. It's not really a straight line there. It kind of sucks in a little bit. Okay, so kind of mimicking that. Then I'm going to come up. Notice that I'm not really worried about all these little flourishes yet. I haven't even gotten the actual letter R on there, so it doesn't really help me to worry about the flourishes. Those would be these little dingle-dongles over here. Technical term, by the way. So I'm going to come up. Notice again, really thick to the top, really thin on the bottom. Similar to my body style. It's all my working out, you see. Thick on the top. No one listens to me. All right, this little crossbar here is very, very thin as well, so we're going to kind of mimic that thinness, okay? So it's not really the letter R yet, but it's starting to look like what we're going for, right? I'm just taking my time, blocking things in, making sure everything's where it needs to be. Now notice, I've messed up a little bit, right? By enlarging this side, I've made it a little bit too big. You see where these don't really line up anymore? This is a little bit too thin, this is a little bit too thick. So that's something I want to take into account. Do I just simply thicken this guy up? Well, that's a little bit too much. Maybe I do a little bit of both. So I kind of thicken him up. Maybe I thin this guy out, because we want them to be the same width. To really make sure that I'm drawing this letter, not just making one up. That's the whole point of this project is, can you draw from reference? Okay, so a little bit more precise, right? Now I'm going to go through again over here. I've got this bar, and looks like it comes up to about the same height, right up there. Looks like the point, just a little bit shy of that. So, block it in, come straight down, come down to about there, and it comes over. There's a little bit of an up right there. Comes over like that. Just a little foot over there. Notice I'm not being very precise. I'm trying my best, but you know, this is not crazy precise. I'm eyeballing it, but I'm having some fun with it at the same time. Again, if you're someone who wants to use a ruler, please do. A little bit of a scoop on there, little footsies. Okay. Think about how far it comes out. Again, the more detailed it is, the more lines you're going to have, because you want to make sure that things are lining up to the best of their ability. This kind of scoops in a little bit, comes back down, and there's a little scoop-de-doo right there. All right, so at this point I've got kind of my basic letter R. I started off with the block letters, and I've built onto it from there, giving it its little serifs and its little feetsies, right? The next step, finally, is to go through and add in all these little flourishes, these little details, and again, I'm going to kind of eyeball them in a little bit. I've got kind of a vertical line, looks like right here. Got another vertical line in the middle. Get a little messy here, I need to ink that in. Looks like there's a line right here. And it comes up. These are all pretty thin lines. Notice that none of them that I'm making are just a literal line, right? I'm actually going through the process and kind of making them a shape to make sure that they're very, very solid looking. And that's the key here. We don't want to just draw, anyone can just draw a letter C. Anyone can draw a letter R. But it's to actually treat these letters as art forms. Okay, something like that. Kind of comes in, down. It looks like I forgot about this little hook right here, and it's right about halfway. So it's going to come out, down. Notice I'm going to block it in, start with the squares, right? And then I'm going to turn those squares into a nice hook. See how I did that? So it comes down, a little flourish on there, like so. This guy comes down and over. Little guy right here, little dude. This guy kind of comes up and around, up, down, over. God, this thing has a lot to it. Holy hell. All right, little guy right there, little dude right there. And again, don't make them just lines, thicken them in, right? So then I'm kind of left with this guy, right? Now, is it absolutely positively precise? Did I take a ruler and make it absolutely perfect? No. I'm not that anal retentive. You are welcome to be, by all means. I'm not, right? That being said, is it obvious that this letter R is that letter R as opposed to this one or that one?
Yes.
Absolutely, and that's what we're going for, right? Remember that whenever you do your project, what we're going for as well is to think of having 2 of my letters are serif, 2 are sans serif, but all 4 are completely different font styles. Okay, so when you're all said and done, you're going to have that differentiation. All right, so real quick, let's see if I can do this here. Oh, that's not plugged in. Hang on. All right, so what I want to do is talk to you about your actual project. All right, we'll just do it on this paper here. So whenever you get your piece of paper, you are going to be given, wow, that just broke. You're going to be given an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. That's basically this piece of paper, regular old printer paper, okay? Now, whenever you do this, you're going to be drawing on a grid, 4 little tiny quadrants to it, right? So we're going to have some excess paper. You have to do a little bit of math to figure out how much am I, cutting off here, right? So we'll have to do a little bit of math to figure that out. We want to make sure that each of our quadrants is a perfect square. So if I've got 8.5 going this way and 11 inches going that way, like I said, a little bit of math is involved, and you can do that on your own time so that you can cut off all that excess. You're going to end up with a nice square that you're going to cut into 4 even slices. The way it's going to work, and again I have a drawing on the front board too, the way it's going to work is this. You can put your letters in any angle, any direction that you want. Feel free, you can draw them upside down. If I wanted to do, I'll do my favorite word. So if I want to do my favorite word ever, I could do like a sans serif right here. See, it's kind of upside down. Who cares? That's fine. Then I'm going to do, here's a serif version of my favorite word's second letter. There's kind of a little serif showing there. It's kind of script looking. Right? So there's kind of a little script version there. Then I'm going to get another script version here, right, to give kind of this X forming, right? So serif, serif, sans, sans. So this one here is going to be, again, kind of a serif version. So we'll do... Maybe there's a little flourish or something, right? And then finally, I do my last letter, which is also, sans serif. I'm going to make it really big. Okay? So there's my favorite word. Oh, it does look like do. So you want to think about that, right? Again, you are welcome to rotate these letters in any way you want, but right now it does look like dupe, which is not my favorite word by any means. My favorite word, of course, is poop. It's a funny word. So, whenever you're laying out your letters, this quadrant right here is going to be serif. This quadrant, also serif. Get it? We're doing a little checker pattern. This guy over here, sans and sans. Okay? So that's step 1. Step 2 that you want to take into account after you've done this initial drawing. And this drawing will take you a little while to get done. Okay? Probably going to take you about a day and a half to get all this stuff done. Not too long, but long enough. The next step you want to think about is how you're actually going to color these in. We are going to be using paint to paint these in. Okay? We're just using tempera paint, same stuff that we used before. There's little tubs back there. You are welcome to use any colors that you want. The key is 2 things. 2 things. A, you must only use 2 colors, and they must be complementary colors. So we know that they're going to be across the color wheel for that, right? So, for example, I'm going to yell out real quick, and you guys feel free to tell me what it is. If my color of choice was going to be red, what is the complementary color of red?
Green.
Nice. Nice. Okay, if my color choice was going to be blue, complementary. Orange, absolutely. And finally, yellow. Purple. Bingo. Okay? So, you can only use those 2 colors. We're going to offset those colors, again, to give us kind of a checkerboard pattern. So your very first square here, and again, I have it on the front board, and I'll leave it up there. Your very first color, the letter form will be your primary color. So in this case, I'm going to use blue. Blue will go there. And then its complementary color, blue is orange, obviously, will go in the background. Then we're going to rotate over here. Blue is now in the background. The letter is the complementary. Then we're going to do the reverse. So then we go over here. Blue is in the background. Letter form. Orange in the background. Primary letter. Okay? Again, this is on the front board. I don't want you guys to forget about it. It can get a little tricky. But what you're going to end up with, basically, is kind of this checkerboard pattern. Like so. Okay? Pretty simple stuff, at least on principle. It's going to take you a little while to do. Your deadline is you're going to have 3 days to do this. Like I said, it's going to be kind of a short deadline. I promise you, you will be fine for finishing. It's not that difficult. It really isn't. There's no blending involved. I don't want to see mixing and matching of colors. These should be very solid colors, just like you did with your halftone project. Whenever you're going through, I would suggest painting one color first, letting it dry, and then applying the second one. Whenever you're coloring, or excuse me, whenever you're painting, I would suggest doing the lighter color first, because the darker one will easily cover over any mistakes that you make. Does that make sense? So, for this case, if I was doing blue and orange, I would do all of my orange on this piece of paper first. I let that dry. Then I come back in and do all my blue, because the blue is much, much darker than the orange. When I'm all said and done, I'm going to cut off my excess, because that way it gives me a little bit of space in case I need to mix and match my colors or blend or anything like that, which I shouldn't be doing. And then whenever everything is said and done, I will put this online and have it ready to go for the critique, which will be at this point on Thursday. Cool? Okay, any questions? Big time confusions? You guys are lost and confused? Don't know what's going on? No? Perfect. All right, that is it. I'm going to come around and give you guys your paper, but in the meantime, I would say start thinking about your letter forms. If you need to start sketching them, even just with some sketch paper, it's over in the corner back there. I'll come around and give you your paper. You're welcome to start whenever you want. Remember that you only get one sheet of paper, so if you mess up, you can always use the back side, okay? That's it.